Okay guys, so after absolutely ages waiting, it is finally time to set up Speckles the Leopard Gecko's new bioactive enclosure. Now, I did actually set it up yesterday. I'm filming this in the future from what you're going to see for the rest of this video, and it is just behind me. But as you'll know if you've been watching my channel, I've intended to do this for ages, but we got set back with Red the Corn Snake's thermostat failing. The thing that I was planning to do for this didn't work out properly, and all sorts of stuff was getting in the way, so it didn't happen for months and months and months. But we finally done it, and Speckles has been in there. He's just behind me about there, not sure if you can see him. He's been in it for about 12 hours now and has been getting on just fine. So why don't we take a step back and I'll show you how I set it up. So the first step to setting up any good bioactive enclosure is adding the substrate. At first I'm just adding the substrate from Speckles' old enclosure because it's well seeded with custodians, as well as the sort of microflora and fauna that are going to aid in the establishment of this vivarium. As this did not achieve the sort of depth of substrate I was looking for, I added in a fresh bag of Arcadia Earth Mix Arid, as well as some Pro-Rep Leo Life just for the sort of yellowish colour. And once that was mixed in, it wasn't quite sandy looking enough in my opinion, so I mixed in some old fish tank sand that I had lying around. The next step was deciding where all the decor was going to go. For a bioactive enclosure particularly, decor really must be functional as well as attractive, so I made sure to put some rocks under the heater, as well as lots of cork bark to offer climbing and hiding opportunities. Make sure if you're doing this that the rocks are on the bottom of the enclosure rather than on the substrate, so that your gecko can't dig under them. With the layout decided upon, I started adding some damp sphagnum moss around the enclosure. Now leopard geckos do actually like quite high humidities in localised areas, so adding this is a really important step that I think many people overlook. It was now time to add some living components to the vivarium. I started off adding 3 plants. I think I've got a Gasteria, an Echeveria, and also some form of Crassula. I've only got 3 because I don't think that loads would really suit the setup, but they do add that just sort of finishing touch that I really like. After this, I set about seeding the enclosure with some Arcadia Custodian fuel pellets. Now this just sort of is going to give the custodians that I'm going to add a good kickstart before Speckles starts producing any fecal matter for them to eat, and it'll dissuade them from eating the plants. Now I am going to primarily be using mealworms in this enclosure because I find they do the best in dry setups. But mealworms will really go to town on your plants if they don't have enough to eat, so doing this is a step that should not be overlooked. And on that note, I added quite a large number of mealworms to this setup. It is a decently large setup, and so you are going to need quite a few custodians to keep it maintained. And in the future I would like to add some isopods and springtails and stuff, but my cultures aren't really big enough to harness from yet, so I just use mealworms for now, and they should do a good job. So just before we add Speckles the Leopard Gecko, and I show you this enclosure properly, I do want to talk about the heating and lighting. So to kick it off, talking about heating, I've got an Arcadia Deep Heat Projector in here, which is a 50 watt heating element, using a filament that gives out infrared A and infrared B as opposed to most heaters which give out infrared C, which is less natural. I have talked about this in the past, so I'll stick a little card up now if you want to check out the video where I explain this. But this is running on a 12-hour cycle. This is the probe for the digital dimming thermostat by Habitat that I'm using. At night it's set to heat to 27.5 degrees I think, although I might lower that down a tad, and in the day to 30.5 degrees Celsius just here at the basking zone. And then for lighting, I apologise if it's overexposed for a bit, but on the left here we do have a 2-foot white python LED kit, mainly for visible light for the plants and stuff. Because the main sort of lighting in here is an Arcadia Pro T5 Shade Dweller unit, and that's only an 8-watt lamp, so if you look at the length of it versus the Viv, it's actually quite small and it would be dim in here. And I had the white Python LED unit lying around, so I just thought I'd stick it in. But for anybody who's interested, that is the heating and lighting. Now then guys, I don't know about you, but I think that this enclosure would look much better if we put Speckles in it. So I'm going to go and get him from where I've just got him stored, and then we'll let him in and see what he thinks. And after I've shown him sort of wandering around and exploring his new setup, I'll give you sort of a more in-depth tour of it and like the different areas and stuff. So let's crack on with it. Here we go, pal. And what do you make of this? Oh, there you go. Back to the morning after the enclosure build, we can see that Speckles has found a little nook to hide in, just down here. Now, from that video you can see that he spent most of his time after I added him just like walking up and down by the glass, and he also did a fair bit of pacing up and down there. And I think that's because just as an individual animal, he really does not like changes in environment. When I put him into his other bioactive enclosure for the first time, he only used one hide, and it took him about 6 months to visit any of the other hides, and after that he was fine with it. So if he just stays in this one hide for all of his time for the next few months, I won't be too surprised. But another thing to note is now that he's in like a more bright enclosure, it's really noticeable that he's a max snow as opposed to a normal. Like, he looks really, really pale. Not like unhealthy pale, but like the pale that you'd expect of his morph, which is kind of weird because I've never sort of noticed it before. Anyway, as promised, we are going to take a little bit of a more in-depth look at this enclosure and sort of how I've set it up. So starting at the left, you'll see that I've got the little crassula down there and also a rock pile, and that's underneath his heat lamp as well as his UVB bulb. So he should be able to come out and have a good bask in the morning. The temperature probe for his thermostat is actually not touching that rock, it's just propped up slightly, you can sort of see, to make sure that I'm measuring the air temperature and not the surface temperature. Then back here he's got a little hide which can also serve as a sort of another basking platform, because believe it or not, cork bark does actually get quite hot. So if he wants to like get belly heat or whatever you want to call it, as well as the rock, he can get a little bit closer there. Then moving over, we do have some little accent stones back there and the gasteria. A white acacia branch just coming down, just to break it up a bit so that the entire enclosure is not focused around cork bark. Then this little hide here that he's in at the minute, as you can see, is gasteria. This sort of tube of cork bark, which has an opening up at the top, a crack running down it that you can probably just about squeeze through, and there is also an opening just down there, you can see, and he will be able to fit through that. So I'm interested to see if he uses this at all. I have seen him on it already last night after his lights were off, but that's that. Then he can wedge himself down there if he just goes around. Sorry about the glare, by the way, but if he goes around this cork tube, he can get in the back there. He probably won't use this little alcove. If he decides to dig there, he could turn that into a hide, but it's maybe a bit small for him. And then we do have this long log hide here that I have seen him walk through, but not sleep in yet. And of course this Echeveria. Now some further notes about this setup are the substrate. It is looking quite dark and soily at the minute. It was just completely soil, the Earth Arid substrate in his old setup, and I wasn't so keen on the colour. It didn't look quite right in my opinion. And in here it is quite dark in my opinion still. It's an improvement, but over time this will lighten up significantly as the moisture content evaporates from it. And also this piece of cork, this one, the small one, and all of the stones in here, apart from the biggest one, are actually from his old setup, so hopefully the smells and stuff brought from his old enclosure will allow him to settle in a bit faster. So that, guys, is today's video. I really hope that you did enjoy it. I mean, I certainly did enjoy setting up this enclosure. I do tend to like setting up new enclosures because it's just sort of fun. I'm pretty sure everybody that keeps animals enjoys it. If you don't, then fair enough, but I'm pretty sure most people do. And it is sort of a weight off my shoulders because I've been wanting to get Speckles into this for ages now. Because the 60 by 45 by 30 centimetre Exoterra I had him in was big enough for the bare minimum, allowed a thermal gradient and a photo gradient and a couple of hiding spots and stuff, but it wasn't enough to allow Speckles to truly thrive. So I'm sure after he's gotten over his initial stress of being moved, he will really enjoy this enclosure. So if you did like this video, then please do show that by leaving a like, and do consider subscribing to my channel to see more content like this in the near future. But anyway, from me and Speckles, and also from Cheeky Char down here, who's been making loads of noise while I've been recording, I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.